In a world where a simple click can connect hearts across continents, the line between reality and deception blurs in ways most of us never imagine. For Chijioke Okoro, a young Nigerian man, the click of a message sent him on a journey that would end in bloody tragedy, a journey driven by love, but tainted by manipulation. What seemed like the beginning of a beautiful chapter in his life would soon spiral into the deepest horror. This is the story of Chijioke Okoro, a man whose search for love took him thousands of miles away from home, only to meet a brutal end at the hands of someone he thought he knew. But how did it come to this? How did a simple, innocent connection between two people become a trap so carefully laid that Chijioke never saw the dangers lurking beneath? We begin with a man at a crossroads in his life, with hope in his heart and love in his eyes. But before the end of this story, those emotions would turn to ashes. What unfolded next would leave a family shattered and a community asking the question, how well do we really know the people we meet online? Chijioke Okoro wasn't a man defined by idle fantasy. He was a dreamer, yes, but a man grounded in reality. Born and raised in Lagos, Nigeria, he built his life on hard work and ambition. A self-made entrepreneur, Chijioke ran a modest logistics business, picking up cargo from one point and delivering it to another, a simple life, but one that provided for his family. For a man like Chijioke, life was a series of calculations. If he worked hard enough, he could achieve anything. But there was one thing that wasn't so easily controlled: love. Akojua, the woman who would change everything. A name that would come to symbolize both hope and betrayal. Their relationship began innocently enough. Messages exchanged over the course of several months, late-night phone calls, the sharing of dreams and personal stories. She was everything Chijioke had longed for, kind, attentive, and filled with promises of a future together. In Akojua, Chijioke found a connection he had been searching for. Distance, time, and even the hundreds of miles between Nigeria and Ghana seemed irrelevant. The bond felt real. But how much of it truly was? Psychologically speaking, relationships formed online can create a false sense of intimacy. The anonymity of the digital space allows individuals to construct identities, present only the parts of themselves they want others to see. For Chijioke, his relationship with Akojua was likely built on an idealized image, an image that was only half true. Deception, experts say, is not always about lying outright. Sometimes it's about omission, the things left unsaid, the carefully constructed facades. In this case, Chijioke was not just talking to a woman across the screen. He was engaging with a story that Akojua had written, and one that played to every one of Chijioke's hopes and vulnerabilities. But the deeper the connection, the harder it becomes to question the truth. Chijioke's belief in the relationship blinded him to any doubts. So when Akojua invited him to Ghana, he didn't hesitate. The promise of love, the possibility of meeting the woman he had grown to care for, it was irresistible. It was on that fateful flight to Accra that Chijioke's journey began, his journey into a world of shadows, one where love and death intertwined in a chilling tale of betrayal. Arriving in Ghana, Chijioke's heart raced. This was it. The moment he had been waiting for. His phone buzzed with a message from Akojua, "I'm waiting for you." He searched the crowd. His eyes flickered over every face, hoping to spot the woman who had captured his heart. But she wasn't there. The minutes stretched into hours. No message. No Akojua. The messages were contradictory. One minute, she was close. The next, she was distant. Something felt wrong. But Chijioke, lost in the fog of love, ignored the creeping suspicion gnawing at him. What could have been a joyful reunion became a confusing, unsettling experience. Was it all a lie? Had Akojua disappeared, or had Chijioke simply misread the situation? But even as doubts began to form, Chijioke continued his journey, unaware that his next step would be his last. The message from Akojua led him to a dim alleyway, an area far removed from the hustle of the city. But he was determined. He believed in her. He trusted her. It was here, in this forsaken place, that Chijioke would meet his fate. Akojua was waiting for him, only she was not alone. Zainab, the real woman behind the alias, stood in the shadows. And in that moment, Chijioke's world shattered. The ambush came without warning. His body crumpled as the attackers descended upon him, brutal, unforgiving. His screams echoed through the alley, but no one came to help. The violence was swift. The life drained from him in the blink of an eye. Chijioke Koro would never see the love he had so eagerly sought. He had become another victim of a cruel, calculated scheme. Chijioke Koro's disappearance sent shockwaves through his family. Days passed with no word, no sign of the young man who had flown halfway across Africa to start a new chapter of his life. But when his body was discovered, mutilated and lifeless in the alley where he had been ambushed, the gravity of the crime took a devastating turn. Ghanaian authorities were quick to respond. Detectives combed through the evidence, and forensic teams worked tirelessly to piece together what had happened in those final, tragic moments of Chijioke's life. What they uncovered would send a chilling message of premeditation and malice. There were clear signs that this wasn't a random attack. This was a meticulously planned murder. The positioning of the body, the method of execution, it all pointed to someone who knew exactly what they were doing. We analyzed the blood splatter, the wounds on Chijioke's body, and the traces left behind. This was a violent struggle, and we could tell he fought for his life. There were defensive wounds on his arms, indicating he tried to protect himself from the fatal blows. We knew this wasn't just a botched robbery gone wrong. This was personal. The killer knew Chijioke. The trust he had put in someone, whether it was love or just hope, had turned into a deadly trap. A breakthrough came when one of the assailants dropped their phone at the scene. It was a crucial mistake, one that would eventually lead investigators to unravel the complex web of lies and deceit that had lured Chijioke to his death. Behind the name Akojwat was a woman known to many as Zainab. A woman with a past that few people truly understood. It would take days of painstaking investigation before authorities uncovered the chilling truth: Akojwa didn't exist. Zainab had been using the fake identity of Akojwa to lure Chijioke to Ghana. For months, she had created a persona so believable, so alluring, that it drew Chijioke in completely. But who was Zainab really? What drove her to murder, and what had she hoped to gain from it? Zainab's behavior is indicative of someone who operates on a high level of manipulation and deception. She likely had a history of using online platforms to exploit others, emotionally, and, as it turns out, financially. Her motives appear to be driven by a mixture of greed and a desire for control. Zainab knew exactly what buttons to push. She played on Chijioke's loneliness, his longing for connection, and his desperation for love. But what was her true motive? The answer came in a series of bank transactions traced back to Zainab's account. Sums of money, both large and small, transferred to her under the guise of a romantic gesture or emergency. Zainab had seen Chijioke as an easy target, a man who could be controlled through emotional manipulation and, ultimately, robbed of more than just his money. She had planned to exploit him for personal gain, and once that plan failed, she resorted to violence. As Zainab stood trial for the brutal murder of Chijioke Koro, the courtroom was packed with spectators, some hoping for justice, others uncertain of what would unfold. The prosecution laid out its case methodically, detailing the timeline of events, the forensic evidence, and the psychological profile of the accused. Zainab, once so composed, now sat in silence, her eyes fixed on the ground. We acknowledge the gravity of this crime, but we ask you to consider the circumstances. Zainab's actions were a result of her own personal struggles. She was led to believe that Chijioke was an obstacle in her path to success. We ask for mercy, but for Chijioke's family, there was no mercy, only loss. They listened as the defense tried to justify their loved one's death, a justification that rang hollow in their ears. The impact on them was clear. No legal argument could bring back the son, brother, and friend they had lost. Guilty of first-degree murder, Zainab was sentenced to life in prison, her freedom forever lost. But for Chijioke's family, the verdict brought no comfort. Their son, their loved one, was gone. Chijioke Koro's tragic death sent ripples of sorrow through his family, his friends, and a nation still reeling from the horrors of the crime. His story serves as a stark reminder of the dangers lurking in the digital world, the blurred lines between reality and illusion, between trust and betrayal. Online relationships are not inherently dangerous, but they require caution. It's vital that we remember the people we interact with online are not always who they claim to be. We must question the motivations behind every message, every photo, every word. In the end, Chijioke's story is one of love, hope, and, ultimately, tragedy. A life lost too soon, a future stolen in an instant. But his death has not been in vain. It serves as a powerful lesson, a call for caution, and an invitation to reflect on the fragility of trust in a world where things are not always what they seem. Chijioke's story has left us with many questions. How can we better protect ourselves from the dangers of online relationships? How do we distinguish between genuine connection and the shadows of manipulation? And in the digital age, how do we truly know the person we're speaking to before it's too late? As we reflect on Chijioke's tragic journey, we ask you to consider your own experiences. Have you ever put your trust in someone you've never met? What safeguards do you put in place to protect yourself? And could this story, in some way, be the story of anyone, of all of us, who dares to seek love in an uncertain world? Thank you for joining us on this journey into the darkness of deception. We hope this case inspires you to think carefully about the relationships you form, whether online or in person. Because, in the end, love should never be a trap.